Welcome to tonight's forum, which is organized and sponsored by Reading Eagle Company and features candidates for Berks County Commissioner. We thank Reading Area Community College for making the Miller Center available again tonight. I'm Harry Dietz, editor of the Reading Eagle. As we did with the Mayor's Forum a week ago, we have come together tonight to experience part of what makes our nation so great, the right to select our leaders. It's important that we hear from the candidates about where they stand on issues and what they plan to do to govern and improve our community. We welcome tonight's participants, Republicans Christian Leinbach and Mark Scott, and Democrats Kevin Barnhart and Don Vimazal. Please listen carefully and respectfully to what each candidate has to say. Please consider who will be the best leaders for our city and our county. Then please go to your polling place on November 3rd and vote. I'm going to turn the program over to Dave Mowry, Managing Editor for the Eagle, and he will explain the format, introduce the questioners, and serve as moderator for tonight's forum. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Harry. Go over the ground rules quickly so we can get on with this tonight. First of all, if you have a cell phone in the audience and you haven't already, please turn it off or silence it. Appreciate that. Secondly, we will not be taking questions from the audience, and I also ask that you hold any kind of applause or reaction till the end of the forum. We don't want to interrupt the candidates, and that way they'll have their full time to answer the questions. Ron Southwick, our news editor, and Karen Shuey, who helps cover politics, will be questioning the candidates. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make an opening statement. Each candidate will then have 60 seconds to answer the question. After all four have answered the same question, if there's need for rebuttal, we'll have an optional 30-second rebuttal period. And then each person will have 90 seconds for their closing remarks. We'll alternate who answers the question first. Gary Lenton is in the front row. He's running the timer. He's already been pointed out to the candidates so they can keep an eye on their time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ron. We'll turn it over to Mr. Leinbach for an opening statement.
Thank you very much. In 1979, I spent 5 weeks in the countries of Hungary and Czechoslovakia visiting relatives. That experience fundamentally changed my life and taught me that I needed to appreciate the freedom we had in this country. As a result, I became active in government, and in large part, I'm involved in government as your county commissioner today because of that experience. I'm running for re-election based on 3 key issues. Number 1, I believe in the free enterprise system. I believe government doesn't create jobs, but needs to create an environment that is conducive to jobs. Number 2, I believe we need to strongly support criminal justice reform. Berks County spends approximately $86 million a year on courts and corrections. Thirdly, I believe we need to continue our solid record of fiscal responsibility. Let's make it clear. When your fiscal house is not in order, when you have fiscal crisis after crisis, nothing else matters. The fact that Berks County is strong today is important to our taxpayers, but it's important to our future. I look forward to this evening to hear about the issues that are important to you and to share some of my thoughts, because I believe that together we can make Berks County better. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
I'm County Commissioner Mark Scott, the 20-year incumbent. When I was first elected in 1995, the county government was a fiscal wreck, hemorrhaging $10 million in operating losses annually. Since that time, Berks County has been transformed into one of the strongest counties in Pennsylvania. Its AA bond rating, $100 million in reserves, fully funded pension plan, and professional management team required years to accomplish. And over those many years, I was the constant player, always driving the progress with creative concepts and hiring more qualified, business-like staff. As commissioner, I have stressed performance over politics and people over special interests. Time and again, my legal and financial acumen have improved this county and saved taxpayers millions. The experience, perspective, and wisdom I bring to my position are a great asset to this board. Grateful for the long-standing support of the public, I look forward to yet another term. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhart.
Yes, good evening. I am County Commissioner Kevin Barnhart, asking for your support as I seek a third term as County Commissioner. I also want to thank the Reading Eagle and Reading Area Community College for hosting this event this evening, and I'm proud and honored to serve as your County Commissioner. I think it bodes well for me as a minority commissioner to have served 7 years as Vice Chair and Chair of the County Prison Board. I think that speaks well to the cooperative spirit of the Board of Commissioners. I too believe we hire the best people to do our job. It's difficult for me to sit up here today and tell you what I've accomplished because mostly it's been a cooperative effort of our department heads, our county employees, and the Board of Commissioners. But this is elections and you have to go out and tell people what you stand for and what you've accomplished. I have a very, very deep and long public and private sector history, starting as an elected official in the Borough of West Reading as a councilman and also as mayor, and now as your County Commissioner. I too hold the line on taxes. Since I've been in office, the actual tax impact on county taxpayers has gone down $14 million in the actual budget. And I have found creative ways to raise revenue. It's difficult being a county to raise revenue. We have brought in technical parole violators at the jail. We have brought in income by doing that, and also by a lot of efforts at the Berks Residential Center to bring income in from the federal government. And I await your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazal.
Yes, good evening. My name is Don Vimazal, and I'll admit up front that Vimazal is a tough name to pronounce and a difficult name to spell. But let me give you a little bit about myself. After graduating from high school, I enlisted in the Army. I served one year in Vietnam and 1 year in Germany. Upon my discharge, I earned an undergraduate degree from Kutztown University and in my MBA in Finance and Economics from Lehigh University. For the past 34 years, I worked for Air Products and Chemicals, a Fortune 500 company. And also during that time, I was also an adjunct professor at Cedar Crest College in Finance, Economics, and Government Accounting. I was also on my local school board for 13 years, serving as president for 12. I'm running for county commissioner because I believe, like most voters, that Berks County has fallen behind when we compare ourselves to our surrounding counties. I believe how well we compare to our surrounding counties is the best indicator of how well our county commissioners performed over the past 20 years, and specifically the past 8 years. I'm also running for county commissioner because I believe that the county commissioner position should not be a lifetime position, that it comes with a lifetime pension. I believe that the county commissioners should not participate in the county pension program, and I strongly believe that we should only serve 2 terms. I'm looking forward to an enjoyable debate tonight. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. With that, Ron, first question for Mr. Scott.
As Commissioner, would you avoid increases to county property taxes? And if so, how specifically would you accomplish that goal?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Would you avoid increases to county property taxes if reelected? And if so, how specifically would you accomplish that goal?
Void increases?
Avoid.
Yeah. Avoid.
Avoid.
Well, I can tell you that I voted twice against the tax increase based on the magnitude of the reserves the county holds. I didn't feel at the time it was necessary. Holding the line on expenditures, from my perspective, requires the ability to say no, and also the insights necessary to understand who's asking for what and how badly they really need it. We rely as commissioners on some professional staff. So we don't micromanage, hopefully, our staff. We have a very accomplished budget director. I was instrumental in hiring him. I championed this individual. He's more responsible probably than anybody for holding the line on expenses. We've picked a lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of our budget. It's going to be increasingly difficult to avoid a tax increase with property tax base growth at under 1% and wage increases averaging between 2.5% and 3%.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhart.
Yes, as I said in my earlier comments, when I came in office nearly 7 years ago, we've been able to trim back the cost of government. The county had on the books between 2007 and today almost $121 million of new projects, which we cut out of the budget. We've been able to cut spending We've eliminated areas like the Youth Detention Center, which I was a key player in that, saving the county $1.2 million in annual cost and $600,000 in addition in workman's comp claims. Again, revenue coming in from the federal government for the residential center, bringing in technical parole violators through the state and being reimbursed for their per diem rates at the jail, cause a revenue enhancement for the county. It is difficult in this environment when our tax base doesn't grow above the cost of inflation, but we have done our best in the last 7 years to only have to have one modest tax increase of 6.3%. I pledge to you that I will continue to strive not to have a tax increase if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol, same question.
Sure. Tax increases, no matter when, should be your last resort. If there's any way you can find to eliminate them or not to increase them, you should do that. One of the things that the county budget currently has is a fairly large reserve. I wouldn't advocate going into that reserve, but prior to talking about any time of tax increase, I'd look at that very, very strongly. If you have a tax increase, it would have to be something that is for the benefit of the county. It would have to be something that the voters looked at and the majority of the voters can look at and say, yes, it makes sense and it's for the future. So to answer your question, it'd be very difficult for me right now to say absolutely positively not, but I would say that would be the last resort. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leinbach.
First of all, when we talk about property tax, the big nut is the school property tax. I continue to believe that school property tax needs to be eliminated. When we look at the issue, we have to look at spending. I would point out that in 2008, the county budget that we inherited was $532 million. The county budget in 2015 is $462 million, $70 million lower than it was in 2008. In fact, every year since 2008, the budget has been significantly lower. That's because myself, my colleagues, our department heads, our budget director in particular, have worked tirelessly to deal with fiscal issues in the county. Some of the things that have been done have been alluded to already, but one of the first things we did was eliminate a major prison expansion. We closed the Youth Detention Center. We merged BARDA with Red Rose Transportation. There's more to do, but the easy stuff, I believe, has been done already.
All right, thank you. Next question, Karen.
A study by the Berks County Planning Commission recently found that Berks residents generally face a higher property burden than those in neighboring counties. What specifically can county government do to ease that burden?
Mr. Barnhart, you're first.
Yes, I think it kind of the same answer as the first one. We certainly have to hold the line on any kind of increased spending that's not mandated or required. Look for more sources of revenue. But at the same time, I've been very instrumental at the forefront with our local economic development agencies, with Greater Reading Economic Partnership, the Industrial Development Authority, and the Greater Berks Development Fund, in working to try to locate new and larger businesses here in Berks County. GRIP does a great job of retaining businesses and recruiting businesses. When site selectors come to town or large corporations come to town, I'm typically asked by GREP to be there as a welcoming committee to bring these folks in. And of course, some of the fruits of that labor have been Berks Park 78 with Dollar General and PetSmart and another large distribution center being built there. I've also worked hand in glove with Hamburg Logistics Park, which is in Perry Township, which should be breaking ground in the spring to actually afford more opportunities for people to work. So the higher...
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol?
Yes, good question. In fact, I think this is a little bit different than the earlier question, in that I think one of the reasons why we're burdened with our property tax is because of jobs going out of the area. That is probably one of the last places that we can look at. And jobs are leaving the area because we've isolated Reading. We have no infrastructure that goes east and west of Reading and north and south. So companies are moving out because they can go to another location that they can get their goods and services in and out. And this didn't happen over the last 2 years. It didn't happen over the last 8 years. But we've let those routes go. And until we get that back, until we get jobs back into the city, we're going to be burdened with this on an ongoing basis. And that, to me, should be one of the first things we try to address.
Thank you. Mr. Leinbach.
Thank you. The study that you reference, all of the details of that study are on the County Planning Commission website, and they specifically took a new $100,000 home, new as in 2015, and compared it to all of the surrounding counties as well as other third-class counties. And the bottom line is that a $100,000 home in Berks County is paying proportionally more in property taxes than their counterparts in the surrounding counties. And one of the issues that is driving that is the lack of the commercial tax base in Berks. I literally discussed this morning with our Shannon Rossman, our director of the County Planning Commission, and she's pulling together some additional data, but she said absolutely that is one of the major drivers. That's why I continue to support programs like Jeep that's helped bring in nearly 300 jobs from Mexico to Analani Township at Cambridge Lee.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Well, I agree that the greatest tax burden is the school tax. And that's something beyond the control of the county commissioners. But they can and have supported numerous initiatives to encourage economic development and new construction of commercial and industrial facilities in Berks County, the most successful of which, of course, is Berks Park 78, which is going to dramatically increase the revenues in that northwestern corner of Berks County. We also need, as Mr. Vimazal said, better jobs, not just jobs, better jobs. And the county has supported, through GREP and other organizations, including RAC, careers in 2 years and workforce training efforts to improve job skills. The question isn't just the absolute magnitude of taxes, it's the affordability of those taxes. And there are various statistical aspects of this study that vary from county to county that call into question whether or not it's less affordable to live in Berks than these other municipalities.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Vimazal, you'll be first.
We've already been talking about economic development, so let's continue it. What would you do to attract more businesses and jobs to Berks County?
To me, that's fairly straightforward. To attract jobs to Berks County is industry goes where things are fast, things are quick. Berks County, our infrastructure, our avenues back and forth around the city have been left go. We need to improve upon those. Anything that we can do to make industry's jobs easier, we should be doing. When you mentioned about the new businesses up on I-78, that's a prime example. Businesses can come there, they can get on I-78, and they can get their goods out of there. Until we address our transportation model, jobs are going to continue to leave the city, and we're just going to continue to go in a downward spiral.
Mr. Leinbach.
I think there's three things. Number one, we need to continue the financial support for the Greater Reading Economic Partnership. They've been able to do what no organization prior to them coming into existence have been able to do, and that's number one, to market Berks County to businesses on the outside, and number two, to work with local businesses and businesses in the outside to connect them with all of the assets they need, whether we're talking about funding, whether we're talking about working with the local codes, the local municipality, making sure that we not only say Berks is the place to come to, but secondly, that we give them the tools to help them expand their business or grow a new business in the area. Secondly, I think we've proven that LRTA is a benefit. The LRTA is what was used to attract PetSmart and Dollar General up at Bethel Park 78, and that has been good for the school district and good for the county.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Well, the attraction of business depends upon a number of factors, and frankly, property taxes are not at the top of the list. Firms looking to relocate to Berks County through our promotional efforts are looking at such things as the location of various sites and their proximity to markets and to the inputs used if they're manufacturing. And also they're looking at the labor force, the skills, the cost of labor, and the availability of labor. Also, employers are looking at site availability. It's very important to have shovel-ready sites, and we have a dearth of those in Berks County, although the IDA has done an admirable job at least beginning to address that problem. Infrastructure, of course, is another consideration that trumps taxes. Availability of quality roads, water, sewer, and electric voltage. We've seen some of those issues rear their heads over and over again as we've tried to promote various locations in this county, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhart.
Yes, education is a large component. Reading Area Community College and their careers in 2 years is in the right direction. But the 8 years I've served as county commissioner, I think we're a very business-friendly community. With respect to trying to locate jobs in the city of Reading, I was helpful but unsuccessful with RSI Home Products, who were looking at the Riverview site. The site is fraught with some issues. It really still needs some transportation infrastructure improvements, but we made the effort. Also with Hamburg Logistics Park that I pointed out a little earlier with Perry Township, there's a lot of things on the front burner. EnerSys in Bern Township. I was involved with the LERTA, and there's a situation where there's jobs that are between $30,000 and $80,000 at EnerSys. They could have gone anywhere else in the United States. They have facilities all over the country and all over the world. They decided to stay here in Bern Township because of the workforce and the folks that are here in Berks County. They want them to stay here. So I think it has a lot to do with education, it has a lot to do with the workforce, and also there are some indicators here.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Leinbach, you'll be first.
What do you think should be the county's role in aiding the recovery of Reading City?
Aiding and recovery of the city of Reading?
Yes.
First of all, I think the county has been a good partner and will continue to be a good partner with the city of Reading. If you look at some of the issues, our detectives unit, several years ago when the city could no longer afford to keep child abuse detectives on their payroll, we agreed and supported the request of our district attorney to take that on. The county, I think, has done a tremendous job, due in large part to my colleague Mark Scott and prior commissioners, in taking the Antietam Park property and fundamentally transforming it. We have a good relationship through our Chief Operating Officer and Carol Snyder working with the Mayor's office. We have had a good relationship. This actually a couple of years ago, the Crime Summit that was hosted by the county, the district attorney, and the Reading Eagle clearly was focused on addressing city issues. Thank you.
Mr. Scott?
I'm looking forward to the election of a new mayor. I think we need more independent leadership, and I think we're going to get it, regardless of who wins the mayoral contest. I also believe that the city needs to have all the encouragement to avoid foolish provisions in its sewer contracts, like the project labor agreement, which only serve to further impoverish the city's coffers. But let's face it, the biggest problem in my view facing Reading, and in part facing Berks County, it's proliferating, is poverty. I can't in the next 30 seconds tell you the diverse causes of poverty or how to address them. But I do know that there's a tremendous imbalance in Reading in terms of its demographics. There are too few middle class and wealthy people and far too many people with very little or no means at all. These people put a very heavy burden on the services that the city provides. I provided an initiative called the Acquisition, Demolition, and Disposition Program that's torn down over 200 houses in Reading to make a start in addressing blight.
We'll have a second round on this question. Mr. Barnhart?
Yes, during my term, I think we've done a lot to aid the city of Reading. We have taken over full responsibility for BARDA. They were paying 1/3 of the local match. We also, from an agreement in 2001, we provide at least $900,000 to the library system. We also give the lion's share of the state money through formula and county money to the Reading Public Library system. Because we're a separately incorporated municipality as a county, it's a difficult question to answer because we don't have fire, we don't have police, we don't have codes enforcement. That's a municipal function for a township, for a city, for a borough. So for us to say we can bring firefighters, we can bring police officers, we can bring codes enforcement officers into the city. That's not the structure of county government. But we are such a provider of social services, of education like RAC, where we're the local sponsor, which for many years was the Reading School District. They can no longer afford it. So the county pays $3.2 million to sponsor RAC. So there are efforts that we have made over the long haul to support the city, and I continue to look for those ways.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol.
Sure, another good question. Essentially, if you look at Reading and you look at our surrounding cities, they had the same issues we do. You look at Bethlehem, you look at Allentown, you look at Lancaster, you look at Westchester, all of them had the same issues. They have the same types of things. What they all have, though, is an infrastructure. They weren't left to be an island by themselves, and to think that the county had no bearing on that, and it was all because of the city government, I think is foolish. I think all the other ones, you look at Bethlehem, they had Bethlehem Steel that moved out. They're a major contractor. You had Allentown, you had Mack Truck that moved out. Westchester went through a major revitalization before. We have left Reading alone. And I don't think we should go into Reading. I think we should just give them the tools. And the tools are having a road system that doesn't keep them as an island. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Leinbach, 30-second follow-up.
When we look at the city of Reading, there are issues, and we are intricately involved with them. If you look at children and youth services, poverty issue was mentioned. We see that. You look at our criminal justice system, we see the impact. And I think what we are doing right now as a county in our commitment to dealing with addictions, whether it's alcohol, drug, or substance abuse, we've committed real serious dollars. That's one way that we help the city and beyond.
All right, thank you. Mr. Scott.
I'm going to go back to something I began to address when I ran out of time, and that is that there's an large obsolete housing stock in Reading that is not attractive, that is only being exploited by slum landlords, and that tends to be inhabited by people, even if they're in compliance with codes, by people who have very low incomes. That housing stock is a burden, and it needs to come down. The cities that have made great progress, like Detroit, Youngstown, Ohio, have gone through very daring and aggressive demolition programs.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhart.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What would you do, what do you think the county's role is in aiding the recovery of the Reading City?
In fairness, I thought I answered that.
That's okay.
Yeah, we're just going over.
We're going to second round. It was an important. It was an important.
Yeah, you caught me off guard too, so.
Yeah, okay, I
didn't realize we were jumping to that.
Yeah, you want to follow up to that.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
I hear from Don the discussion at numerous forums about us cutting off the city from the county and the county from the city. But I only today was down at the Buttonwood Street Bridge, complete rehabilitation of that major artery owned by the county. We don't own the roads coming in and out of the city. They are predominantly state roads. But in my efforts on readingbridges.net, a public-private partnership, we have moved forward in rehabilitating not just the Schuylkill Avenue Bridge, the Buttonwood Street Bridge, the Penn Street Bridge, and ultimately the Binghamton Street Bridge. So I'm at the forefront of helping the infrastructure improvements moving in and out of the city.
Thank you. Mr. Beamasol.
Yeah, and they were all good points. Essentially, I'm not saying that we're not helping the city of Reading or the county hasn't helped. I think it's misdirected, though. To help the city of Reading, we as the county commissioners have to really set that up as far as what can we do as far as getting a route in and out of Reading. Until we direct that, and I do understand that we don't own the roads, but we have to be the group that directs the state and directs the counties to work towards that. If we don't do it, who is?
All right, thank you. This will be a new question. Mr. Scott, your answer first, please.
Voters will select 3 of you to serve as commissioners. If elected, which of the 2 candidates in the race would you most want to serve with?
Which of the candidates would I most like to
I'm
start
glad you got that one
with?
first.
That's a loaded question.
Well, I haven't even spent any time thinking about that. I can tell you this. I think the voters are going to decide for the board, for me and for the rest of the board, who's going to serve in the next term. In the last several debates, I've had an opportunity to look at, well, first of all, I've worked with my colleagues now for 8 years. I know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they all bring certain talents to the table that are valuable to the county. Mr. Vimazol, in my opinion, has a good resume, and I think that he is a qualified challenger, and I want to commend him for having the guts to take on something as daunting as running for county commissioner. It is not an easy endeavor. It's not often pleasant, and it takes a lot of energy and hard work, and anybody who steps up to the plate and seeks to serve the public, in my view, deserves some commendation. Am I ducking the question? To an extent, because I haven't made up my mind, but I know I'll be voting for myself on November 3rd.
All right, Mr. Barnhart.
I have prided myself in my work history to be able to work with anybody. I think in the last 8 years, I pointed this out in my opening comments, that I work with a Republican majority. I'm the vice chair of the board, also chair of the prison board, which I'm quite proud of. And I think we work very collegially. This is not Washington, this is not Harrisburg. This is really running a large social service agency, the 4th largest employer in the county, $462 million budget. This is not the place for politics. But I can work with anybody. What I like about the mixture of the board presently, and I'm sure if Don's elected, would be the same thing, that we kind of have our own strengths and our own weaknesses. We kind of are together at many meetings, but we also separate out, and we have things that we're passionate about. Like I pointed out about infrastructure and bridges and BARDA. I mean, BARDA's not a glitzy thing, but I joined the board, and we were able to merge with Red Rose Transit to save $500,000 a year for the local county taxpayers. So we all dig in. I know Christian's on the Conservation Board, Mark's heavily involved in the Planning Commission. So I'm sure if Don would be elected, the same thing would hold true, that we'd kind of split our responsibilities and do the best work the three could do.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol?
Yes, I find this to be a great question, to be honest with you. When I came on the board, I received, not came on the board, I'm sorry. When I threw my hat in the ring, I received a lot of phone calls. And all of them were calling up, telling me about one or the other commissioner. But there wasn't one commissioner in general that they were talking about. They were all saying they wanted to support me, they would do anything they could. But since I've been on the campaign route with the three gentlemen to my left, I could work with any one of the gentlemen. In fact, I wouldn't mind if any of them would be my neighbors. I might want large fences, but I would have no problem with any of them. So, yeah, I don't have an issue.
Mr. Leinbach.
The only person that can really answer that question are the voters. And am I dodging the question? You bet I am. I think what's important is not for me to somehow advise people on how they should vote, but to simply say what I think about the current Board of Commissioners. And I believe that our record speaks for itself. When you look at the fiscal record, it is very clear that there's strength on this board. I think both Commissioner Scott and Commissioner Barnhart noted that their strengths and their weaknesses. I look at Commissioner Scott, fiscal and legal, has some very good insight. Courts and corrections is a great area as far as, and transportation. And I am also convinced that if Don Vimazol was elected, with his background with Air Products as an engineer, his background on the Kutztown School Board, he would be good in the mix. At the end of the day, November 3rd, the voters will decide who are the three best people to be your next commissioner.
All right, thank you. Next question, Mr. Barnhart, you're first.
A recent Reading Eagle review found that over the past 25 years, Berks has funded drug treatment efforts at levels more than 5 times of its neighbors. Do you think the county is taking the most effective approach to combating addiction?
We've taken the most effective approach. In some respects, I think we can do more. I don't look at that number and say, where do we compare with other counties? I say to those other counties, why aren't you spending more money? $1.7 million for drug and alcohol recovery. With a recovering population in this county of 34,000 people, doesn't seem like a lot of money. I would challenge the other counties, and I will, as to why they don't spend enough. Now, in fairness, we believe strongly that a lot of the other counties put their budget numbers in different areas. They will allocate money for DNA treatment into their jail budget. Ours solely goes to COCA, and that money, about $650,000 of it gets diverted out to the jail for drug and alcohol recovery. I stand proud as a county commissioner that we're trying to help people that are on the road to recovery. When you look at the heroin epidemic in Berks County, this is money well spent. If we save one life, it's worth that investment.
Thank you. Mr. Beamasol.
I'd have to agree with Kevin. I think that is money well spent. But I think we missed that mark from the Reading paper. I thought they were saying that we spent a lot more than the other counties and asking the commissioners why. One of the first things I do when I look at it, I have a project or I look at it, I compare myself to my neighbors, I compare myself to the other counties, I compare myself to the other competitors. And we should be spending more here, but we should be able to answer why we're spending more. And that didn't come across. We should at least know what we're doing and compare us to other areas. And if we have variances, we should be able to justify that and explain why it's there. Without doing that, we're flying blind. So to answer your question about why are we spending enough? I think we might even have to spend more in that area because it is something that's really affecting us. But it doesn't address the question of why didn't we know what we were spending and compared to other areas.
Mr. Leinbach.
I think the answer is really rather simple. 32,000 people in Berks County are currently in some stage of recovery from some type of addiction, alcohol or drug addiction. A couple of weeks ago, we had roughly 100 of those individuals at a commissioners meeting, and we heard from a number of them. Let me just quickly share two. One, we heard from a young lady who had 2 or 3 children. She was arrested, sent to jail. Her children came to the Children and Youth Department. She was in danger of losing those children to adoption. She cleaned her life up. She got in a recovery program. She is out of jail. She has her children. We also met a man that said for 14 years he was in our criminal justice system. And that meeting was the first meeting that he came to at the County Services Center where he didn't get off at the 7th floor. What's on the 7th floor? Adult probation.
Mr. Scott.
The gist of the question suggests to me that there's an argument being made that we should spend less. And that raises the question, it begs the question, what are human lives worth? This county has been a leader in many respects, but it's been a leader in terms of addressing not only addiction, but in the context of education and programs. But it's actually been a hands-on provider at the Berks County Prison with the Community Reentry Center, something that was advocated by a previous board of commissioners that's got some very successful statistics preparing people to leave prison and enter into a productive lifestyle and avoid reusing drugs and winding back in jail. The recidivism statistics on that are very encouraging. I want to point out also that I think, again, poverty and its growth in this county play a role in not only the recruitment of people who deal drugs, but the people who tragically use them. So it is a very diverse and difficult problem, but I have no problem with the level of expenditures currently being made.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Beamasol, you're first.
The criminal justice system is one of the county's biggest expenses. What can be done at the county level to make the criminal justice system more efficient and more effective?
I think our judges have talked about that, and also our sheriff. We have to divide this into almost 2 sections. We have a lot of drug addictions, so we have a lot of people that are addicts. They should be rehabilitated. We should work with those. Now, the ones that are selling the drugs and the ones that are pushing the drugs, they should have a different time period that they should be serving. I think until we address the issue of how we can rehabilitate the person that's in prison, we're just going to have revolving doors. And I think the county is doing a pretty good job in that regards and heading in the right direction.
Mr. Leinbach.
We already have a veterans court. We have a DUI court. But I believe we need to do more. I mentioned in my opening statement that we're spending $86 million of county taxpayer dollars annually on our courts and corrections. I think there's a number of reasons for that, but one of the areas we need to look at the clearly nonviolent population. One way we deal with that is if they have an underlying mental health issue, if they have an underlying addiction issue, let's deal with that issue. We don't deal with that simply by locking people up. we cannot incarcerate our way out of those issues. But secondly, we incarcerate truly nonviolent people. Within the last 10 months, we've had 2 elderly people that had Alzheimer's dementia issues and were arrested and sent to our county jail. Do you feel safer knowing those people were in jail? And a little over a year ago, we had a lady by the name of Eileen Danino die in our jail serving charges on truancy.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Well, improvements to the criminal justice system entail also law enforcement. And I believe our district attorney has done a marvelous job and have very much improved the efforts of the district attorney since his election several years ago. John Adams, by the way, our district attorney, supports the expenditures on the drug abatement programs that have been criticized as excessive in expenditure. I mentioned the Community Reentry Center. We also have a drug court. One thing that can be done on the commissioner level is encouraging the president judge to follow through with his promise to consolidate the district justice offices, the 4 of them that are in Reading. That should help to cut the expenditures related to that particular office. So in fact, I think if we do that, we'll be the first county to do that since 1979 in the entire Commonwealth. And I'm very much encouraged that President Judge Yatrin will assist us in achieving that goal.
Mr. Barnhart?
Yes, in 2004, the average daily population in our jail was 1,400. Through the efforts of our courts and our district attorney, John Adams, our average daily population is about 1,100. Doesn't sound like a lot, but 300 people make a big difference. I'm also working on an effort with mental health people in the jail for the most critical needs. A lot of these folks need 24/7 coverage by a corrections officer. So we need to get those folks transitioned out into society, into a facility that can care for their needs instead of being watched and monitored and actually falling behind in their mental health improvement. And again, as my colleagues pointed out, we have treatment courts, we have the Community Reentry Center. We're doing a remarkable job with recidivism, lowering recidivism rates, and the Employment Council, which meets on a quarterly basis and tries to cultivate through Berks Connections pretrial services more and more employers to give these folks a leg up when they do come out of jail so they don't recidivate, that they go out and become employed and become productive members of society.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Leinbach.
As Commissioner, how would you work with the state and local government to see through transportation projects of regional importance like the widening of Route 222 North?
I have been very active over the last number of years on meetings dealing with transportation and specifically 222 North. Back when Governor Rendell was governor, Secretary Beeler was Secretary of Transportation, the late Senator Mike O'Paik set up a very important meeting with the Secretary focusing our attention on 222. It was as a result of that meeting that we got a commitment for an on-alignment improvement from 2 lanes to 4 lanes for Route 222 North. Under the Corbin administration, I was involved in several meetings with then Secretary Barry Shoke, where we got a commitment of funding, and ultimately in 2013, in the transportation bill, had funding allocated for the on-alignment improvement of 4 lanes from the road to nowhere, Maiden Creek, all the way to the Lehigh-Berks County border.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Can we please repeat the question?
How would you work with state and local government to see through projects, transportation projects with regional importance, like the widening of 222 North?
Okay. Well, first of all, I served on the Reading Area Transportation Coordinating Committee, and I've served there since the 1990s. Most of these improvements are PennDOT's responsibility, state-funded, federally funded, and we act as an advisory board and make recommendations and put together transportation improvement plans. But it's primarily a state function. The county owns around 70 bridges. And years ago, we had taken our liquid fuels money, which is a state allocation, and given them away to other townships, which was politically expedient but it left us with no money to repair our deteriorating bridges. This board changed that in 2008. We're keeping the money in-house and we're fixing our numerous bridges, and we have a program in place. And those bridges, many of them link various municipalities together. They were built for that purpose many years ago. I want to also point out that I took the lead in saving the Colebrookdale Railroad, which has the potential to bring rail freight. People don't think about railroads, but they're very important. Rail freight in the Boyertown area.
Mr. Barnhart.
Thank you. I do also serve in the Reading Area Transportation Study Committee as a representative from BARDA. I want to point out that this Board of Commissioners allocated $5 million for the design and construction of 222 North. We sent a letter to Governor Corbett, so we did put our best foot forward to try to incentivize expediting 222 widening. Serving on the BARDA board, merging with Red Rose and the South Central Transit Authority, we're now looking to partner with 7 other counties potentially to improve mass transit. So that helps to move cars off the roadways. The more people in buses, less cars on the road. At one point, we owned 62 county bridges. We're down to 59. Why? We've removed some that are of local insignificance, and we've also turned some back. We're turning back a bridge in Maiden Creek Township. We're turning back a bridge in Greenwich Township back to the townships. These are township-centric bridges that connect one side of the township to the other. They don't really have a value for county, so we're turning those back, and we have about 6 more in the pipeline.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol?
Yes, again, you're correct, these are state county functions, but not state counties, but the county does not have direct access to the roads, but we have to be the ones that are driving this home. And 4 years ago, when I looked at the Meet the Candidate Forum on channel BCTV, I noticed that one of the candidates said that they weren't looking to expand any of the roads. They were looking to maintain the roads that were here. Another candidate at that time said that the roads were falling apart, but I don't think anybody really connected that to job market and what's happening to Reading. It's just something that they can say, the state has to do it or the federal government has to do it, but other counties are getting these roads. Other counties are getting these improvements. We have been left go for the last 20 or 30 years, and we haven't had the improvements that we need. You heard we had 70 bridges. We're now down below 60. We're passing that over to the local government, but we're passing over the burden to the local government. So it doesn't matter whose pocket it comes out of, it's still the taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Scott, you'll be first.
The Berks County Residential Center has gained a lot of attention in recent months. Would you support the county continuing its arrangement with federal government for the facility's operation?
There are a number of benefits that accrue to the Berks County taxpayers by continuing the operation of that residential center. First of all, it makes productive use and brings in revenue from buildings that would otherwise be vacant, and vacant buildings deteriorate very quickly. So we get out of the cost of maintaining a vacant building. We're trying to preserve it intact. We get additional revenue, which is substantial. We create some local employment of roughly 70 employees who work there who are Berks County residents. And we serve our country's effort to, sometimes I think it's half-hearted, to enforce the immigration laws so that we deal with legal immigration instead of illegal immigration. About 50% of the people in that center, I am told, are ultimately deported. That means they're not legitimately here seeking asylum. And they go through the process. They have to be held somewhere. And they have to be held someplace that's humane and that's affordable. There's a very, very good care provided there. Anyone who's taken a tour of that facility will conclude the facility care is outstanding.
Thank you. Excuse me, Mr. Barnhart.
Yes. We do receive revenue from the federal government of $1.3 million for office space. And I want to clarify something. I'm not here to determine whether it's right or wrong for these people to be temporarily housed there. But this is a licensed facility, not like what you see in the newspaper. It is licensed. The 2 in Texas are not licensed. They are inspected by the federal government. We meet all the criteria. What happened in the last year and a half was the folks coming in from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador were backing up, and literally the lawyers were asking for appeals upon appeals upon appeals. This center has been nothing more than a processing center the first 13 years. The last 2 years, people have been there over a year. That's what caused the big dust up in the community. Now it's gravitating back to being a processing center, people there for a few weeks till they find family members or sponsors to put them back into the community. So I think it's a worthwhile endeavor for the county. We're supporting our federal government, and we're doing quite a good job of doing that. And these children are treated better than most kids in the city of Reading.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. The Berks County Residential Center has gained a lot of attention in recent months. Would you support the county continuing its arrangement with the federal government to operate the center?
Yes. Yes, I would. It's fairly straightforward. I think the services that we're providing is adequate and good. And until the federal government changes their model, I think it's appropriate for us to do that.
Mr. Leinbach.
I also believe that this is an appropriate effort for us to be involved in, and will support continuing the lease. There are actually two tenants, if you will. We have Homeland Security offices, and we have the residential center. Often when the people refer to it, they only think or only believe there's one entity housed there. Secondly, as was noted, this is a licensed facility, licensed by the state, inspected by the state. It's been inspected by the federal government. And I am very proud of the people that we have working for the county. Diane Edwards in particular is the department head leading that effort. They are doing a very good job under difficult circumstances. And so I continue to support what we have and believe it is a good program.
All right, thank you. Next question from Mr. Barnhart.
What opportunities, if any, do you see for Berks to work with other counties to provide services more efficiently?
Well, I've pointed out, I think, 3 times now this evening. One that I've been at the forefront of is consolidating mass transit. I think that's gone exceedingly well with Lancaster. We're now looking at 7 other counties as far out as Adams and Cumberland and Franklin County. And those kind of efforts are really enhanced by an association like the County Commissioners Association, where county commissioners know each other, we relate to each other, and we're trying to find efficiencies and cost savings. I think that's a big, there are other areas of the Commonwealth looking at this as a success, and again, the other 7 counties looking to us. They don't want to do this on their own, they'd rather consolidate with us. We're going to take it slow, we're going to take it steady, because again, we saved $500,000 a year over 5 years. If we merge or consolidate other counties into this program, we'll continue to see other savings. I think the sky's the limit on agencies like this. We could also look at consolidating some of the larger social service agencies within the county, like MHDD or CYS.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol.
Sure. Another good question. I agree with Kevin, basically. I think we should be looking at other counties, and any place we can merge and any place we can consolidate, we should. But I think we should also be looking at the other counties to see how they're doing things and how they compare to what we're doing. We're probably doing some things that they can gain from, and I'm sure that they're doing things that we can gain from. And once we start doing that, it's very similar to what you would do in business. If somebody has a better mousetrap than you, you'd want to find out how to compare and how to improve yours. So in that respect, we should be really close to our closest neighbors, and we should find out what they're doing and how we can help them and how they can help us. Mr.
Leinbach.
I think there are a number of ways. The relationship between BARDA and Red Rose merger is an excellent example. Recently, through the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, counties came together and supported and won 911 legislation, a 4-year bill. At the federal level, I've been very active not only with our state association, but with the National Association of Counties. And over the last 2 years, we've been fighting EPA regulations called Waters of the U.S. And many people thought, well, we lost because those were implemented a couple of months ago. But last week, a federal appeals court stopped the implementation of Waters of the U.S. And in large part, that was because of the County Commissioners Association at the national level working hand in hand with the Farm Bureau. Right now, we're working to stop or bring the repeal of the Cadillac tax. And again, this is a Democrat and Republican organization working together across county lines for the good of our taxpayers.
Mr. Scott.
I can think of a number of areas where Berks County has worked with other counties or is proposing to do so. I believe that there was a proposal put in place, and I think it'll come to fruition where another county, I think Montgomery, may serve as a backup operations center if our 911 center would go down. So, and that's sort of a mutual aid pact that would be put in place. The district attorney works with law enforcement in other counties all the time, sharing information. They have integrated their computer networks, et cetera, to really be able to network and find criminals that, as you know, travel across county boundaries. A good example of joining together to perform a study was, I think Chester, Montgomery, and Berks went in to study the Schuylkill Valley Metro. That was an extensive study. It concluded, most people who read the study concluded it wasn't affordable. It's very desirable, but it was too expensive. And then the Colbrook-Dale Railroad, Montgomery County commissioners have stepped up and provided funding to help that line, which is in both counties, become a success.
Next question, Mr. Vimazal, you're first.
What would you do as commissioner to help improve Berks County's agriculture industry?
We're preserving a lot of agricultural land. I would maintain that and continue with it. Again, transportation is a key issue with our agricultural system. I tried to start improving upon some of the local farmers as far as getting their crops into town, a farmer's market. I know we have them, we've been doing this for a long time. We have farmers markets in Kutztown. We have farmers market in West Reading, but increasing the areas around the city would be ideal. But really, the farmers, I think, are doing fairly well. They have a fairly good structure right now. I'd really put that on them, ask them what we can do to help them.
Mr. Leinbach.
I've been a member of the Berks County Farm Bureau for 19 years and recently attended their annual dinner where we went over a series of resolutions. And the county has a very positive reputation with our farm community. Part of that is due to the nearly 70,000 acres that have been preserved through farmland preservation. My colleague, Commissioner Scott, was really involved in the infancy of that program. In addition, we have a robust Clean and Green program that this Board of Commissioners agreed to a number of years ago to freeze the Clean and Green rates at the 2001 rates. And finally, we have actively supported, and I believe it's important that we not just focus on preservation. It's good to have preserved farmland, but we need to actively support the right to farm. As we have more and more development pressures up against farmland, there are more and more conflicts, and I will continue to support the right to farm.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Well, I'll go back to 1998, the first agricultural preservation bond issue, which was my idea and embraced by my then colleagues. And now we have roughly 68,000 acres preserved, number 3 in the United States. It required the floating of 2 bond issues, wasn't without its controversy, but that more than anything preserved the basic resource necessary for farmers to thrive. That's number 1. Secondly, I fought to keep the valuation of clean and green productive lands frozen at the 2001 level, as Commissioner Leinbach referenced. I think that's been a boon to farmers. Letting that float would cost the agricultural community thousands of dollars in additional school taxes per farm. Lastly, my son is a full-time produce farmer and very successful. I have tremendous respect for his work ethic. He's not looking for a lot of government help. And I think agriculture receives an adequate amount of government assistance. He's very independent. Other farmers are as well. And they're happy to be successful entrepreneurs without any more government intrusion into their enterprises.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhart.
Yes, I've supported ag preservation. We place $1 million a year out of general fund to match with state and sometimes federal money to enhance our 70,000 acres. I too supported the Clean and Green freezing at the 2001 levels, which eases the tax burden for folks that are on farms. And we repositioned the ag coordinator into an ag department, which really is now reaching out to work with our Workforce Investment Board and greater economic partnership for farmers of the future. We just assume farms are going to be here forever, but it's not just always about the land. It's about who's going to farm that land when the family passes on. So they're passing it on to generations, and there's some generations don't want to pick up the mantle, so we have to find other people who want agricultural careers. So we're working on that diligently with our new and reconstituted ag department. That's about all I have to say at this point.
All right, thank you. Last question for the night. Mr. Leinbach, you're first.
A Reading Eagle review and subsequent professional study found that much less money is spent to attract visitors to Berks than in similar counties, and that Berks needed a more focused brand. What can county commissioners do to efforts to attract visitors to Berks County?
Well, first of all, I had a meeting in my office several weeks ago with Crystal Sites, and one of the things that we looked at is the current source of funding, and that comes from the hotel tax. It's split roughly 80-20 after 2% is taken off the top for administrative costs by our treasurer, because they're the ones, the department that collects and audits the tax. 80% of that currently goes to the Convention Center Authority. 20% of that money goes to fund the Visitors Bureau. One of the things that we did a couple of years ago, we voted to expand the hotel tax countywide. We were the only county in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the only county in the country that had a hotel tax that was not countywide. It had an arbitrary line. I think what we have to do is look at the future of the hotel tax and determine if more can go to
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
tourism.
I'm skeptical that government should be in the tourist promotion business. I tend to think that private enterprises are pretty successful at promoting themselves. We don't have a bureau to promote automobile sales. I don't know why we necessarily have to be as involved in promoting tourism as we are. When we take money out of private enterprises that run tourist destinations, like the $200,000 the expanded hotel tax took from the Bear Creek Resort, $200,000 a year that cost them. I think we're taxing businesses to help businesses. That doesn't cut it in my view. I say let the money stay in the businesses' pockets, let them creatively deploy their resources to bring in additional visitors, and I think they've done that in the past. So I'm not in favor. I voted against the hotel tax expansion. I must be honest about that. I think the private sector tends to do a better job of these things than government does in general. Thanks.
Mr. Barnhart.
Yes, it's interesting how we get criticized for not spending enough on visitors and hotels, but we get chastised for spending too much on drug and alcohol recovery. So it's an interesting conundrum. But I serve in the Visitors Bureau, and we just embarked on a strategic plan which came out a few months ago. And one of the indicators there to me was, for so many years we've been asking people to be dues payers members in order to have the services on the website and put marketing information out there about your facility. We were charging dues. Now we're going to be looking at a sponsorship where you're not required to pay dues, but we're going to put you, there were literally 1,200 facilities, places of interest in the county, whether it's a restaurant or a scenic area, who were not members. We're moving over to, we're going to ask you for a sponsorship level. We're going to make you part of this total process, and we think we're going to raise more money that way. But conversely, you take a county like Lancaster, they've got probably 5 to 6 times the number of hotels, and they also charge bed and breakfast to 5% hotel tax. Ours is minimum for several reasons.
Thank you. Mr. Vimazol.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. Not so much what you're asking, how much we compare to the other counties, but that's something the county commissioners should be doing. They should be looking at what we're spending and what other counties are spending, and then having an explanation as to why, because there are good reasons. But until we know whether we're high or low, you really can't see where to plug things up. That's one of the first things I'm going to do. I mean, that's what I would do if I was losing to a competitor. It's what I would do if I was winning. I'd want to know where my competition is. Now, the other counties aren't our competition, but they do have an indication. We do know what they're spending, and we should be able to tell you, the press, or ourselves, why we're spending more or less. So to answer your question, I do think that we have a right to be a cheerleader for the county, to try to drum up business as far as getting visitors to come in. We have Hawk Mountain. We have the pagoda. We have bike races that are national. So.
Thank you. Closing statements, Mr. Scott, you're first.
Wow, I thought it was going to be longer than this. So what can I say after all this time? I believe I've accomplished a great deal in my multiple terms as county commissioner, and I'm very appreciative of the support that I've received over the many years of my service. I think it's important in my candidacy to stress that I'm an independent thinker. I try to do what is, in my view, right for the public as a whole, and I try to be sincere and honest and forthright with the public in my dealings with them. I'm very concerned about people who struggle in their lives in large measure because of taxation. I've worked very hard to keep the county government lean, responsible, and effective. I'm overwhelmed when I think about the 20 years of work that I've been involved in and all the accomplishments. I won't list them now. But I've had a privilege that I could never have had in the private sector. That's one of the few benefits, in my view, of being in government. I got a chance to make a profound difference. I developed a legal strategy to save Antietam Lake when most people were about to give up. You know, I was able to use my financial education to turn around the county pension fund, save millions of dollars and make it fully funded and help to keep taxes in the county low. Time and time again, I've had a chance to be in a driver's seat that you can't be in as a lawyer or an entrepreneur on the sidelines. So I'm deeply grateful, and I appreciate the county's continuing support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barnhart.
I look forward to the challenge of the next 4 years, whether it's federal and state unfunded mandates. I'm going to fight to repeal those and make sure that they fully fund those mandates. We're going to have struggles with pensions, looking at the mental health issues at the jail. There's continuing struggles with Reading, with crime, with poverty, with housing and social services. But I think there's a bright future for Berks County, and I want to be part of that. I want to work collegially with the mental health providers and try to eliminate some of the folks in the jail system. I want to continue to expand South Central Transit Authority to continue to save more money. I want to continue to work with economic development agencies, working with them to bring business to Berks County. I also have an interesting one, Penn Reserve, if anyone's aware of the Pagoda, the Tower, Angora Fruit Farm, Antietam Park. I've been working with some of the folks already to look at that as a destination. We talk about Visitors Bureau. That's a great potential destination, one-stop location for us to look at as Penn Reserve, not individuals trying to raise pennies for the pagoda or for the tower, to look at that as a tourist destination. I think that's really a positive thing. And also, I want to make sure the future commissioners can focus on the top issues of the day, not just mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beamazal.
Yeah, I'm basically going to wrap up the evening the way I started it. You have heard how well the county commissioners believe they're working together. You've heard what great financial shape the county is in their pension program. Bottom line, I think most voters feel that Berks is no longer stacking up to the other counties. I remember a time when Berks could go toe-to-toe with their neighbors. I believe I've heard from many in the community that this is no longer the case. And quite frankly, it's not because of us. I strongly believe Berks County has some of the most generous, genuine, and hardworking people I've ever known. No, it's not because of the communities. It's not because of us. It's because of what the county commissioners have done in the past, or not done in the past. What I'm asking for is every voter has 2 votes for county commissioner. I believe I would like one of those votes to be for me. I believe that this can only help the 2 remaining county commissioners by providing a different and fresh insight from what they've heard over the past 8 years. Why do I think my suggestions and changes would be beneficial to the county? Because this is my area of expertise. This is what I do well. I have 34 years of financial background and a master's degree in finance. And I believe that Berks County's problems are because of money misdirected by the county commissioners. So again, my name is Don Beamazell. I'm running for county commissioner. Beamazell is a very hard name to pronounce. So I'm asking you, the voters, when you go into the voting booth, to remember that Beamazell and voters both begin with V. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Mr. Leinbach.
One of my favorite quotes from history comes from Teddy Roosevelt, and he said, "It's not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man, and I will add, or woman, who's actually in the arena." A number of years ago, I chose to enter the arena of public office. I'm here today not as a Republican, not as a Democrat, but as a person that sincerely believes that we can continue to make Berks County better. There are no red potholes or blue potholes. They're just potholes. Potholes that are a problem that need to be fixed. I enjoy working in county government because I enjoy, as odd as it may sound, identifying and finding the problems and working together with my colleagues, working together with department heads, working with the city of Reading, working with municipalities, working with our association at the state and national level to solve problems. Whether we're talking about fiscal issues in the county, we've solved a lot of those problems. If we're talking about jobs, we've worked to improve the job situation, but we need to do more. And finally, in criminal justice reform. I believe this is one of the biggest opportunities that we have, both from a cost, a financial cost, but also from a social cost. When we jail people who are truly nonviolent, the community loses and the taxpayer loses. I ask you for your support. Check me out at christianleinbach.com. Thank you and God bless you.
All right, thank you. That concludes the forum. I'd like to thank the candidates and everyone for coming tonight. Also like to thank Brett Balder here at the theater for his help and the RAC administration for hosting the event this week and last week. And remember to go out and vote November 3rd. Thank you and have a good night.